It was a quiet morning at the local precinct when Officer James, a seasoned cop known for his brash demeanor, encountered a man he assumed was just another civilian. The man, a well-dressed black individual in his 40s, had come to meet the department's leadership. But before he could explain his presence, James made a snide remark, a demeaning comment laced with prejudice. "What's a monkey like you doing around here?" he sneered, the words dripping with arrogance and ignorance. Unfazed, but clearly offended, the man paused, his calm expression masking an undercurrent of tension. He locked eyes with James, his voice steady as he replied, "You'll find out soon enough." Moments later, whispers began to ripple through the station. A meeting had been called, a mandatory gathering to introduce the new chief of police. Officers shuffled into the briefing room, curiosity and apprehension in the air. James followed, still oblivious to the storm brewing. As the station's captain stepped forward, he addressed the team. "It's an honor to welcome our new leader. Please give a warm welcome to Chief Daniels." When the man from the lobby walked in, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to James, who now stood frozen, his earlier words echoing in his mind. What happens next will leave you speechless. As Chief Daniels stood at the front of the room, his commanding presence was impossible to ignore. He scanned the crowd, his calm yet powerful demeanor, leaving no doubt he was the one in charge. James avoided eye contact, his face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and confusion. The other officers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension but unsure of its cause. Chief Daniels began to speak, his voice steady and confident. He shared his vision for the department, one rooted in accountability, respect, and integrity. He spoke about his extensive experience in law enforcement, from his early days as a beat cop to his years, leading initiatives that brought communities and police closer together. His words resonated with many in the room, but for James, they carried an even deeper weight. The chief's calm professionalism only amplified the unease James felt. Flashes of their earlier encounter replayed in his mind, each detail sharper and more damning. Why hadn't he listened? Why had he jumped to conclusions? As Chief Daniels continued, he touched on the importance of fostering a culture of understanding and eliminating prejudice within the ranks. His tone was firm, but not accusatory, a clear message to everyone in the room. James shifted uncomfortably. The man he had insulted wasn't just another face in the crowd, he was now his boss. What would Chief Daniels do next? The meeting ended with a round of applause, but the atmosphere in the room remained thick with unease. Chief Daniels smiled politely, shaking hands with officers as they introduced themselves. When it was James's turn, his palms were sweaty, and his usual confidence was nowhere to be found. He extended a shaky hand. "Chief, welcome to the team." Daniels looked at him, his expression unreadable. For a moment, James thought he might say something about their earlier interaction, but instead, the chief shook his hand firmly and moved on. The exchange was brief, yet it left James feeling even more unsettled. Over the next few days, James couldn't shake the tension. Every time Chief Daniels walked into the room, James felt the weight of his mistake pressing down on him. Yet the chief never brought it up, treating James with the same professionalism as everyone else. This only made James more nervous. Was Daniels biding his time? Did he plan to address the insult privately, or worse, in front of the whole team? Meanwhile, whispers spread through the precinct. Some officers noticed James's uneasiness and speculated about what had happened. Others, inspired by the chief's leadership, began reflecting on their own biases. Daniels had quickly become a respected figure, but his quiet authority made it clear he wouldn't tolerate injustice. James felt cornered, grappling with guilt and the fear of consequences. But one question haunted him most. Was an apology even enough to fix what he'd done? Days turned into a week, and James' anxiety only grew. He noticed how Chief Daniels interacted with the rest of the team, his steady presence, his willingness to listen, and his fairness. Daniels was earning the trust of officers and staff alike, but for James, every interaction was a reminder of his own failure. He couldn't escape the memory of his insult, and the chief's silence on the matter made it worse. One morning, the chief announced a department-wide meeting to address issues of trust and respect. The topic struck a nerve with James. As officers gathered, Daniels stood at the front of the room, his tone serious but calm. He shared stories from his career, times when bias and stereotypes had created divides, and how those moments shaped his resolve to bring change. His words resonated deeply, leaving the room silent except for the occasional cough or shuffle. Then, without naming names, Daniels spoke about the importance of accountability. "We all make mistakes," he said, his gaze briefly landing on James before scanning the room. "But what defines us is how we own them. Ignoring the problem only makes it worse, for you, for your team, and for the people we serve." James felt his heart pounding. He couldn't tell if Daniels was indirectly calling him out or delivering a broader message. The tension was unbearable. Just as James thought he couldn't take it any longer, Daniels paused, his next words drawing the entire room into complete stillness. "Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is admit when we're wrong," Daniels said, "but it's also the most necessary." The weight of his statement hung in the air, and James knew the moment of reckoning was near. The room was heavy with silence after Chief Daniels' words. James could feel every eye on him, though no one had explicitly called him out. His pulse raced, his thoughts a tangled mess of guilt, pride, and fear. But before he could decide whether to speak, Daniels made an unexpected announcement. "I want to share a personal experience," he said, his voice steady yet firm. "Not long ago, I had an encounter that reminded me why these conversations are so important. Someone made a quick judgment about me, a judgment rooted in prejudice. And while I won't name names, that moment stuck with me." The room tensed. Daniels' story had everyone on edge, their curiosity piqued. James felt the walls closing in, certain the chief was talking about him. But what came next was even more shocking. "Moments like these aren't just about the harm they cause," Daniels continued. "They're also opportunities for growth, for both parties. You see, the person who judged me didn't know my story, my struggles, or my journey. They only saw what they wanted to see." His gaze swept the room, lingering on James just long enough to make his point. But then Daniels shifted gears. "This isn't just about that one moment," he said. "It's about how we move forward, as individuals and as a team. Because the real question isn't who made the mistake, it's who's willing to make it right." The tension was broken by the sudden ring of the precinct phone, a call coming in that pulled several officers, including James, into an emergency. As they scrambled to respond, James couldn't shake the feeling that this was his chance, not just to prove himself on the job, but to make amends. Little did he know, this situation would challenge him in ways he never expected. The emergency call led James and a small team, including Chief Daniels, to a chaotic scene at a downtown apartment building. Smoke poured from an upper-floor window, and residents were spilling out onto the street in a panic. A child's scream pierced through the commotion, and James instinctively looked up. A young boy was trapped on a balcony, flames licking dangerously close. Without hesitation, James took charge, coordinating with firefighters to secure a ladder. But as time ticked away, it became clear they might not reach the boy in time. "We can't wait," James said, his voice firm. Daniels, standing nearby, gave a single nod. "Do what you need to do," the chief said, his trust evident. James scaled the fire escape, ignoring the heat and smoke. When he reached the boy, he wrapped him in his jacket and carefully descended, each step feeling like an eternity. When his feet finally hit the ground, the crowd erupted in applause. The boy's mother rushed forward, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her son tightly. Back at the precinct later that day, James was still catching his breath when Daniels approached him. "Good work out there," the chief said. James hesitated, then finally spoke. "Sir, I need to say something. About that first day, what I said to you, it was wrong. I was wrong." Daniels studied him for a moment before replying. "I know," he said, his tone kind but firm. "And today, you showed me you're better than that." Just as James felt a sense of relief, Daniels added with a faint smile, "But you owe the whole team donuts tomorrow. They've been betting on how long it'd take you to apologize." The room erupted in laughter, breaking the tension in a way James hadn't expected. For the first time in weeks, James felt like he belonged again, this time for the right reasons. The precinct buzzed with laughter as the officers teased James about the impending donut delivery. For the first time in weeks, the tension that had weighed heavily over him began to lift. James couldn't help but chuckle at himself, realizing how much his pride had held him back from simply doing what was right. Over the next few days, James noticed a shift, not just in how others treated him, but in how he viewed himself. He began engaging more openly with his colleagues and listening instead of reacting. Chief Daniels, true to his word, fostered an atmosphere of growth and accountability. He never mentioned James's mistake publicly, but his quiet encouragement pushed James to be better. One afternoon, James saw Daniels in his office, reviewing case files. Gathering his courage, James knocked. "Sir," he said, "thanks for giving me the chance to make things right." Daniels looked up and smiled. "James, it's not about chances, it's about choices, and you made the right one." As James walked out, he reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The man he'd once dismissed had become someone he deeply respected, and his own growth had been sparked by the lessons he least expected. In the end, James realized that respect wasn't just earned, it was practiced, one choice at a time.